We didn't even have a women's bathroom on the production floor. Yeah. Like
5 years ago.
Just 5 years ago.
What would happen if we just told the truth?
Welcome to TruthWorks, where we dig into the nitty-gritty of leadership and work.
And what needs to change. I'm Jessica Neal.
And I'm Patty McCord.
Our journey together started in HR, but trust us, it's evolved into something wild, honest, and well, a bit rebellious.
So throw out the handbook. We're here to redefine rules to work for us, not against us.
Let's dive into another episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of TruthWorks. I'm Jessica Neal.
And I'm Patty.
Hi, Patty.
Jessica, our guest today.
I know. Sachin is the CEO of a Wisconsin aluminum foundry. And it's a century-old, family-owned manufacturer business based in, how do you say the town?
Manitowoc.
Manitowoc.
Wisconsin.
Yes, like that.
Yeah, Manitowoc.
Yes, okay. And so your business is metals and, well, tell us a little bit about it. And then I'm going to tell people why I got interested in you and you can tell that story.
Yeah, I mean, we are a metals manufacturing company exactly like anyone might imagine a metals company to look like. We melt metal, fire, heat, all that stuff. And we have big guys who carry that around, sometimes by hand. And then we pour it into molds and we make custom parts. And then we sell our customers a part that can go right into whatever they're building, whether it's medical equipment, satellites, earth-moving equipment, trucks, cookware, whatever it is. We make a custom aluminum shape.
Wow. That's fascinating. And so how many employees?
We have about 900.
Okay.
I'm our first non-family CEO. I feel like I'm part of the family.
I'm sure.
Truly do, in all the good ways. But we're in our 5th generation of family ownership. We have about 60 shareholders. And, several years ago, we had some, like many companies do when they get to this level of longevity, some shareholder, anxiety and turmoil. And so the family decided to go outside for leadership for the first time. And that got to be me.
Oh, wow. How'd they find you?
I live in the community. I was running a different business, an aluminum business in Riverside, California, and living in Wisconsin and flying back and forth every week. And at that time, our kids were 2 and 4 years old. And I used to leave our house at 2 a.m. in the morning, and it's a 9-hour door-to-door commute to Riverside from Green Bay. And we were kind of contemplating moving to LA and really want to stay in Wisconsin. And in that moment, this opportunity just came up.
I also love how you went from Yale Law School to manufacturing. I mean, hello.
Yeah. How's that happen?
Yeah. I grew up in Wisconsin, so it probably had something to do with that. And that, I was around a manufacturing environment. But I actually went to Yale Law, and I was in my 2nd year there in law school. I had just done a summer at a law firm and liked it, but just wasn't feeling kind of the idea of being a lawyer. Although I loved law school, and I kind of, I read The Firm by John Grisham in the 6th grade. And I think that planted this idea in my mind of what it was like to be a lawyer. So I wanted to be that sort of lawyer. And and I realized that's not the job. But, in this moment of kind of mild crisis, I read, a book that carries a lot of political baggage. I always even hesitate to say the name because then it's like, oh, you're this way or that way. It was Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. And it really, wasn't the political philosophy that got me, but one of the main characters, Hank Rearden, runs a steel mill.
Yeah.
And I just loved that idea. And I just felt, this is what I need to do in life. It was that kind of random of an epiphany.
I think it's so wonderful. When I wrote my book, I did a bunch of talks in Canada, and Canada is very industrial. I mean, so when I would do a group of CEOs there, they were all in manufacturing plants. And so there's something very visceral about making stuff. Right? That you can hold in your hand and you can see, and that is a part that somebody uses. I mean, I get the connection. It's not John Grisham.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's better.
Yes, it's better. And so then you come on as CEO, and I want you to tell the story of what intrigued me to reach out to you, because I read this NPR article and you sort of get this epiphany.
Yeah, we have a very kind of intimate working environment. I mean, we're not a big company, and everybody knows each other. Everybody knows everybody's business. You see each other at the bar. Yeah. You know who has had what issue, and so we're kind of a very tight knit group to begin with. And I was having a conversation with an employee before he started a shift in the parking lot, next to his car, and he was about to start, and we just were casually talking, and I spotted a child car seat in his back seat, and it was pink, and it was just in this sea of garbage, just like Mountain Dew wrappers and chip wrappers and all sorts of stuff. And I just got to thinking like, oh, I wonder what he does for childcare. And so I asked him, it's like, oh, hey, what do you do for childcare? I can see you have a daughter. And he was like, yeah, she's 4 years old. And I take her to a different house each day. And sometimes it's grandma, sometimes it's a neighbor, or other friends who are helping out. And that's what we do. And, he didn't actually even say it in a way that he was struggling, and this was before kind of the whole childcare crisis blew up during COVID. He was just saying, this is matter of factly what I do. And, that really tugged at the heartstrings. I was just imagining this little girl, backpack in tow, like blanket and toothbrush, and just going from home to home. And, I remember thinking, I imagine she's loved by everybody she's cared for by, but it can't possibly be the type of environment that is going to put her on the type of trajectory we all hope for our kids. And really influenced by a high school friend and college friend of mine. He's an economist. His name is Raj Chetty, and he's at Harvard now. And he does a lot of research on what drives mobility in America, economic mobility. And he's focused a lot on the impact of early childhood education. He was the one that you probably have heard of his study that talks about the lifelong impact of a kindergarten teacher. And, that idea just really stuck with me. And I thought of that, that was the context. And, I'm just imagining this girl, and it just struck me that, those early years are so, so important. My mother taught me to read when I was, young and before I went to K4. And that made all the difference, in my life. And it just felt bad, that she was in that spot. And we kind of set about from that moment in our company, let's do something to help our employees afford better care, than what they could otherwise afford. That was the beginning. And so we paid them, or we gave them money to be able to go to a licensed childcare facility. And then the whole thing blew up during COVID, where nobody could get into childcare facilities. I imagine, the situation was probably largely the same all across the country. It was especially so in Wisconsin, where labor is already very tight, and people couldn't find spots. And so we were offering this money to our employees, but
they couldn't use it.
They couldn't use it. Yeah. And then we just opened it up to, we'll give you $400 a month to just spend on whatever you're doing to take care of your kids. And hopefully that somehow helps them have something better than they would otherwise have.
Yeah. And didn't you even look at like opening up your own childcare facility?
Oh yeah. And so the story, the NPR story was about kind of the whole journey that we've been on. We started out, we tried to open our own childcare facility. We worked with childcare, operating businesses. There are several across the country that do this. They work with businesses and help you open it, and then you bear the cost.
So expensive.
Work through the economics. It was a nightmare. Work through the economics, finding real estate, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it turned out, we couldn't sustain a full childcare center on our own. We have about 25 kids, in any given community, and you need about 140 to sustain a center economically. And so we tried to find, a consortium of businesses who would want to come in on this with us. We couldn't do that. We applied twice for a statewide grant. During the COVID time, using ARPA funds, the state of Wisconsin did a thing called workforce innovation grants. And it was grants to support private sector initiatives to improve, workforce participation in the labor force. And so we submitted twice grant proposals where the state would help us kind of subsidize a center, and then eventually we'd wean ourselves off of a state subsidy and then eventually have a center of our own. We didn't get the grants. We also worked in partnership with our local YMCA to fund expansion of capacity at other local businesses. So not build our own, but do that. So we just weren't able to get anything going. And one of the main learnings of this was just how expensive childcare is. We sat down. I remember distinctly, we were working with the YMCA, and we had their CFO on the line and their CEO and me and our VP of HR, and we're tabulating all the numbers. And it's like, ta-da, like the number shows up at the bottom of Excel, and it was $42,000 per child per year to do everything we wanted to do. Yeah. Which, somebody can pay that, but in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, where we are, or Wabash, Indiana, or Crookston, Minnesota, or New Hampton, Iowa.
Silicon Valley, California. I want to interject because, we certainly, Jessica and I are Silicon Valley gals. She's a Texan now, so it's changed. But nobody could sustain it. I think that's what's a really interesting learning from you right now is that everybody thinks, oh, you could do it if it wouldn't be that hard, right? Why can't my company do this? And the other thing about it that's interesting that I want to talk about too is that it's not related to your business directly, right? It's not going to sell any more aluminum parts. Definitely it's going to make your employees more productive. And back to Ayn Rand, right? The capitalist system doesn't necessarily include that perspective in how we think about work and workers and production and profit and
that's the thing. A lot of people, workforce professionals all across America are kind of doing that. They're saying, hey, businesses, if you're not supporting this, then you can't get the work. For our company, for me, it's even more kind of personal and fundamental here is that like you don't feel the panic about this issue unless you're actually thinking about the child's experience. Yeah. If it's a workforce thing, well, right now the labor market is a little more slack. Nobody's having difficulty finding people. And so the interest in that kind of wanes. But if you think about this from the child's perspective, what's happening to a lot of kids, they're just not in the types of experiences that they truly need in that age. And then there are plenty of other people who are, and so it's our communities where we are that are just going to fall behind because kids don't have those, that kind of structured educational experience. And so that's what we really try to focus on, even more than the labor force thing, which, as you mentioned, Patty, is squarely the heart of the issue of a lot of businesses can't find people these days. And so that is absolutely a thing.
Yeah. So, you're out there trying and nothing's working. And so then what do you do?
Well, then we just started, paying our employees, and it's, the disappointment there is it's not a structural solution. What we recognize is there's a market failure. I think Janet Yellen has characterized it the same way. There's just a market failure where we recognize kids need a certain thing. Private sector can't pay for it. Parents can't pay for it. We need some public assistance, in my view. Maybe not forever, but some training wheels to get us headed in the in the right direction. And so that's what we were really trying. It sounds ridiculous, telling you this now because nobody in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, is going to be able to, create the structural solution for childcare across America. But that was kind of the project, and in the end, we just ended up doing what we need to do for our employees. We're going to pay them, and hopefully their kids. And we have plenty of good examples of actually making an impact.
Yeah. Well, let's hear a little bit about the impact. That I think it's $400.
Yeah, $400, which
monthly or
monthly. Yep. And we have about 100 parents participating in the program. And for one example that comes to mind is we hired young woman from the country of Colombia, and she moved to Iowa, then moved to Wisconsin. She doesn't speak English. She has a young boy who is about 7 years old, and when they moved to Wisconsin, she got to afford childcare, putting him in a kind of a not a preschool program, but like a summer program. And he speaks English now, and his name is Matias. And I actually just saw him last weekend. And this is exactly what his mother wants. She's like sacrificed all sorts of stuff to be here. And this little bit, of now he's going to be a little bit better prepared for school. He's going to feel more confident. He's going to understand what's happening. And then I think it's just going to multiply, across the span of his life. And that's that's the sort of impact that we're going for.
Yeah. And I think it's lovely that, one, you're passionate about this, and two, that you're trying and putting massive effort around it. Because a lot of companies don't, because it is complicated, and they don't all show up too in terms of giving extra help, like $400 a month. So when you were talking with other CEOs in your area and trying to get them to work with you on this, what was their response?
A lot of them acknowledged that it is an issue in the community. But when push came to shove, okay, guys, we have 140 spots we need to fill. We've got the first 25. What can I sign you up in terms of a commitment for? Then it became, well, it's like, I don't know if I have that many, and it's not really affecting me. And, they kind of retreated back into.
There's no line item on the P&L for this.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's the main thing. I mean, it is a main expense. I mean, the people that are getting the $400 a month, the median wage is around $50,000 a year for us. So that's 10% increase. But it just, people kind of retreated into it's a problem, but not for me. And this is why I always tell people, like, for those of us who care about this issue, if we're out there selling it in terms of a workforce necessity, we're going to kind of run out of steam. Like, it really has to be something that parents and people who care about their communities are thinking about the child's experience and what we need for our kids in our community. And then you kind of actually feel that desire, to do.
Right. Because it's more, there's more mission and purpose behind it.
Exactly.
It's a really interesting perspective coming at it from the child's perspective. I hadn't thought of that, and all the times I've been thinking about that. That's a really important thing to do, because I'm thinking about, as I've experimented in the past with, like, giving that kind of financial benefit. Well, if I don't have kids, then you get the benefit just because you have kids. And the answer is, well, right, because you don't need it. but I mean, but the idea that what we're doing is we're investing in the next generation of having, stable, healthy children, that I think speaks to everybody, right?
Yes.
A lot of the companies, another pushback that they had was exactly what you said, Patty, which is, well, if I give one benefit to somebody, then what's everyone else going to say? And I'm going to create a lot of turmoil, so I can't do it.
Right. I'm going to need a beer benefit.
And our response is, first of all, we have done it, and there hasn't been one inkling of dissatisfaction that way. And we are exactly the type of environment where, if anybody's going to be opposed to something, we have plenty of curmudgeon-y union guys, and I'll say that, with a lot of affection, because I, know them, and they'll laugh if they hear this. But, people who are 60 years old, 55 years old, or very far from having kids, and for them to see, some new hire, some immigrant new hire woman, or a young man getting $500, $400 a month that they're not getting, you would think they would be opposed to it. Nobody has said anything, because people understand. They're like, when I was in that age, I struggled.
And it is a struggle. And I think, what I was so struck by in reading the NPR article, and I think a lot of folks lose sight of the type of employees that you have in your organization, because you have employees that are working the night shift, right? You have employees, that come early in the morning and have a different type of childcare struggle than some people who just work a regular 9 to 5, right? And how do you think about childcare when your shift is like 10 to, what's the shift, 10 to?
Well, the 3 shifts we have are 6 to 2, 2 to 10, and 10 to 6 in the morning. The hardest shift is at 2 to 10, I mean, how do you find childcare from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. at night?
Right. It's dinner,
really
it's
hard.
supper, it's homework, it's
Yeah.
And so it's beautiful to hear that the other employees don't care. And I'm actually not surprised by that, because, people, to your point, care about children and the next generation. And so I could see them, being delighted by that versus, something that they're getting it and I'm not getting it. Tell us about some of the feedback that you've gotten as a leader from the employees, or just what's the sentiment?
Well, first, we have an environment where we share a lot of feedback. At all of our plants, we have employee-only Facebook pages that we're in the Facebook demographic, like Midwestern, 30 to 60 years old. These are the people who are on Facebook nowadays. And so people love it, and they will say whatever they want. And so we have these employee-only pages where, I've been called ignorant on there. Just there's kind of no filter. They'll say whatever. And also I'll say I'm quite open about my politics at work. We hosted Joe Biden during September 2020. So right before, that election, which was intense and crazy. And most of our people, I'd say then and now, support Trump. And people were mostly understanding, and it was like a cool thing. So we have an environment where not only do people share feedback, but we also discuss things that are generally quite incendiary. And, a funny, I'm kind of going off topic a little bit here, but not a funny incident, but a kind of a touching incident happened. We were in the midst of negotiating our latest contract with one of our unions. We have 3 unions. And this was in February or March of this year. And we had been through 2 rounds of rejected contracts already. And, for me, and I was, doing a stand up in front of everybody, kind of doing a little town hall. And I said, look, a lot of people say, that business isn't personal, but for me, everything is personal. And the negotiations became very personal. And I said, you know what, you guys have reacted this way. You're not understanding the context. We're taking the childcare benefit away. And I expect, and I, not the majority of people are on the childcare benefit, but what I wanted was the people who were on it to go talk to their union leadership and say, hey, the company is giving us these things that are not in the contract, and let's negotiate. And that was my aim. And so I stormed out of this meeting. The timing could not be more perfect. Storm out of the thing, and I come back into my office, and the receptionist, Nicole, she didn't know about what was going on, and she was like, hey, I want to show you something. And she shows me this onesie with a little hat for a newborn, and it had our logo on it, on the onesie on the thing. And it was just like, oh my God, what are we doing? Why did I felt like such a piece of dirt, having done this, held the childcare benefit hostage as part of the negotiations. And so I immediately posted on our Facebook page. I posted a picture of the onesie, and I said, look, I know I just did this. One thing we're not going to do, I regret it. One thing we're not going to do is negotiate over childcare. And the feedback, you asked about the feedback, was overwhelmingly positive. It was like, good, I'm glad we're putting that aside, because that's about our kids, and we can negotiate tough about other stuff, but not about that.
I love that story.
That's such a good, Jessica. That's going to be us when we talk about leadership a lot. We talk to CEOs and other leaders about sometimes you can just be straight and admit you were wrong, right? It really is okay. The other thing I love about your story is, the cynical part of me as you were talking was like, well, they could just have their wives take care of it. Yeah. Right. Their wives could stay home from work and take care of the kids. And what the beautiful thing about the story you told was, this is what manufacturing workforces look like in America. Mm-hmm. It's a single woman from Colombia. It's a dad who's having their parents take care of this, right? As long as their parents are able, until their parents aren't. But this is what the heart of America, the heart of the workforce looks like. Yeah. Right. It's not 1954 anymore. They're not all staying home with their mom and dad, and their grandma's not living with them either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every Thursday before Labor Day, we host retirees. So we invite our retirees to come back for a breakfast. We cater in a breakfast and make it kind of elegant with tablecloths, and some of them are in walkers and wheelchairs, and they all come back, and then we tour them through the plant. And so this year, at our Manitowoc facility, we had about 60 retirees come, and It's like 2,000 years of experience that they had. And, we're wheeling them and walking them through the plant. We just built an expansion onto our facility here. And one of the guys said to me, he goes, man, people look a lot different than what they did. And what he meant was, we've got a lot of immigrants. We've got a lot of women. 5 years ago, actually, we had no women on the production floor. Wow. We didn't even have a women's bathroom on the production floor. Yeah.
Like 5 years ago.
Just 5 years ago. We had no Hispanic employees. I think we had one African-American employee. And then we were a little smaller. We had maybe 350, 400 employees at that time. But, fast forward now, we have women on production floor at all levels. Our director of quality is a woman. We have plenty of immigrants. I think about 30% of our staff are not native English speakers. I mean, this is like a sea change.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to take us back to childcare real quick. So no one solved it yet as a company or, corporations. And there's some companies that have, that they have their own childcare on site, but, that's got issues as well. It doesn't solve the problem. So what do you think? If we are looking at it from your perspective, which is about the child's experience, what do you think the answer is, or what do we do?
Well, the thing I fixate on is wages for childcare providers so median wage for a childcare provider in the Manitowoc area is $12.50.
Wow.
We start our new hires at $26. So we might be a bit high in the marketplace, but let's say the median starting wage is 21 or 22. Who is taking a $12.50? Nobody. Mm-hmm. And the ones who do might do it for the wage, plus they get the benefit of having, their child for free in the child care center, which is an important benefit. But to me, the genesis of the problem, at least in part or in large part, is the wages that we're paying childcare providers. And then you think about why we're paying those wages. Well, it's because so what we did when we came up with our $42,000 per child per year, cost was we said, okay, we're going to pay them $21 an hour. We got to pay a good wage. And that's what creates this high bill, right? Mm-hmm. So you understand that you can't pay high wages because people can't afford to, so it becomes this chicken and the egg thing. Mm-hmm. And so, what I think part of the solution is how do we get the whole economy to get accustomed to paying more for childcare? Mm-hmm. I think it'll eventually solve itself over a generation, maybe. I don't think any of us wants to wait that, because what's the cost of waiting, 30 years? All sorts of kids are going to have less than optimal experiences during that time. And so I think we need to accelerate the customization process to mm-hmm. that higher cost. And that's where public subsidies and things like that come in. But we in the end, that's it. We just need to get accustomed to paying more for this public good. Just as we pay $1,000 for a cell phone, my cell phone bill for myself, my iPad is $180 a month. I guess I found the money to pay for that. Mm-hmm, somehow we've kind of all adjusted to paying for that. And so I just think it's got to be one of those things that we have to adjust to paying for.
I think you're right. But it's interesting because, whether it's childcare or teachers or whatever, no one's caught that up, right? It's still sort of just lagging behind, and everybody knows that that's the problem, yet no one's coming to the table and writing any checks, right?
Yeah, but don't you think it's the long tail of just women in the workplace and women's jobs and women, keeping up with men, and it's all of those jobs that are traditionally women's jobs.
Right.
That are, when you do your starting wage for a worker, you pay that for a qualified worker, period. It doesn't matter, can they do the job? And it's those traditional teachers, right?
Who are mostly women. Yeah.
Who are mostly women. And it was always unpaid work. It was just in the last decade or so that we've recognized that, childcare is a job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in the interim, because that might take a while to get sorted.
Yeah.
What should companies do? What should CEOs think about with this issue?
I think solving it on our own as a business, unless you're just a giant, hugely profitable company, Google or Facebook, something like that, Netflix. For the rest of us, it's got to involve some level of working with our local or state or hopefully federal government to come to create some structure where we are subsidizing the cost of care for those who need it and in the communities that need it, but we have an off ramp for how do we get the economy to take care of this, assuming we don't have the tax revenue to sustain this forever. So I think that's what I would advocate for CEOs is to advocate
Right.
for a public, in Wisconsin, we have a program called Child Care Counts, which is a state subsidy for child care centers that pays a supplemental amount to a child care center based on the true cost of care. So we calculate, child care providers should be earning $19, $20 an hour. And so it pays the center that, kind of, if you had employees that were earning. Yeah. So it pays the gap. Now that program, it was slated to end at the beginning of this year. And the governor was able to kind of scrounge together another $180 million to keep it going. But in June of 2025, all of that funding is done. And so what I'm urging our CEOs to do is let's advocate for the continuation of that program. And so I think these are the things that if you care about this issue, you got to advocate for it on a state, local, federal level.
Yeah. And why should CEOs care about it if it's not a line item on the P&L?
It just sounds probably cheesy or cliche. I think it's for kids, there's nothing that gets people more, in my experience, more motivated and animated and, than kids, mean, providing a good opportunity for them to succeed in life. That is it. And especially in that zero, people have to maybe do the intellectual work to understand what happens to a child between 0 and 5 that really sets them on the path that they're going to be on for the rest of their lives. Like if you come around to believing that, this is what we have to, this is what we have to sell.
And I think your workers will be more productive and more engaged and more loyal, likely, with all of that as well. There is an ROI to it, I think.
Yeah.
It's hard to calculate, but there's an ROI.
It's a trade-off.
No, you hit it on the head with loyalty. I think, in our line of business, most of what we do is not like written somewhere, it's in somebody's head and they've just done it properly for years and years. And so an employee, our median tenure is about 22 years. When they get into like 15 to 20 years, man, they are really good at what they do, And so if this benefit helps someone stay because of the good feelings they have about the company, stay that long, you're right. We've more than made it up.
Wow. The average tenure is 15 to 22 years. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I think it has to do with the unions too, a large part of the unions. One thing I, learned kind of being in this environment is the things that unions put into place to reward longevity. They actually help the company a whole lot, like you got to work your way to get a first shift job. Well, once you get the first shift job, you don't want to leave to go some other employer where you have to stand back in line and get a third or second, and so they stay with us. And I think a lot of companies will grumble about it. They'll be like, I can't move this guy to that position because whatever. But the plus side is they stay.
Yeah.
Well, and you have empirical evidence that experience matters in these particular situations, right?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of when Jessica and I talk to lots of different people in lots of different types of work. In some cases, it doesn't matter, right? You have a skill, you can go do it and do it and do it and do it. And it's not, I sometimes say institutional knowledge really only matters if you're in an institution. But manufacturing is very institutional, right? It's something that you just learn by doing because it is physically doing.
Yeah. And there's no, at least in our line of work, there's no like systematic credentialing system, systematic system, there's no, whatever, where, I know what they know, right? But they can't tell the outside world what they know because they don't have the language or like the credentials to be able to say, oh yeah, I know how to run these machines. And, and so they're kind of also the more you know, the more you're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Because we don't have these kind of micro-credentialing or whatever you need for them to be able to communicate.
Right.
Ooh, another whole good conversation, huh?
I know. I mean, we could have you back and just talk about unions. So we'll ask you to leave our listeners a little nugget of something. I know you've already, inspired them, but this can be for employees in general or leaders, whatever. But we always ask our guests to leave a little advice.
I think a lot of, like, if you read leadership books and things like that, they focus on, what is my mission as a leader? My mission is to set a vision and then amplify my ability to execute on that vision through the efforts of others. And so leadership books that I've read, at least, often focus on like the motivational aspect of it. How do you get the team working? And, but what I found is like the cousin of that, or like the twin challenge of that motivation challenge, is how do you foster good judgment, in employees, so that not only are they, is this
you've spoken up.
Yes. This was our life's mission.
This is our life's mission. Just judgment. It's just judgment.
Yeah. I didn't know this at all. This was something that, this is your life's mission. But it's something you recognize is like one aspect of amplifying your efforts is to motivate people, but the other aspect is to get them to be out there making good decisions. And so that fostering of judgment, that is, to me, that's the harder one. Harder than motivation.
I love that because, you can read stuff about Netflix, but we relied a lot on empowering employees. And we talked a lot about context, not control, which Patty was a creator of. And it really is arming your people with the best information possible so that they can make the best decisions and do the best work.
And when people write these, send me their flowery decks about, their values, I'm like, there's only one: judgment. Are they going to make the right call, right? Do you trust this person to make the right call? Because, and the right call, you said it so beautifully, was sometimes the right call is to say, I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That was the oops.
Sorry.
I learned something from that. And that's how judgment is created. Just thank you for that. What a great conversation.
Yeah, I know.
It's been wonderful.
Will you join us in a career confession?
Oh, I would love to.
Okay, great.
How do I know if I'm ready to mentor? I've been in my field for years now, and recently a younger colleague asked me to be their mentor. They're talented, ambitious, and eager to learn, which makes me feel like I could really help guide them. But I'm worried that I won't be that good at it or able to give the right advice. What if I fall short in helping them succeed? I want to help, but I'm just not sure if I'm ready or wise enough to take on that kind of responsibility.
What do you think, Sachin?
Oh, you're going to have me go first?
Yeah.
I'll start out kind of in a negative way, though. I would say I've often, been approached by people like, oh, I'm looking for a mentor. And I've consistently found those to be disappointing because either they're like truly not looking for a mentor, it's something else, or they want an affirmation of a decision more than they actually want advice. And so I'll be honest, I've never found these relationships fruitful. But what I would say is I think for this person is to, if you can hit upon what is it that they truly need advice on, and then do that. I don't think the person will know upfront, like, what do they need advice on? So I think through conversation, if you can get at what is the thing that they're kind of at a crossroads about, and then let's hone in on that. Hopefully they can have a different experience, than I've had.
No, it's so funny you say that because that's been my experience too.
Me too. And I know people have always said, can we have a formal mentoring program? One of my pieces of advice is to say, and I think that's what this person is doing, or the person that asked them is doing. I say, if you kind of want to know what you want to be, find somebody who's doing what you want to do and just say, how'd you get there?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Just learn from their experience. They don't have to, because
mentor
like we
you.
just said, part of it is making mistakes and learning from them.
Mhm.
It's like sometimes it's overly structured and it just ends up to be,
Yeah.
I tell them, you got a mom.
It's a forced relationship,
Yeah.
And I think that's perfect advice, Patty. It's like, find somebody that does it well and go find out how they do it versus them being your official mentor. And I found that the mentors in my life, those things happened organically. Like Patty was a mentor for me and, taught me everything I know.
Everything, every last thing.
Every last thing.
Yeah.
But that was a natural thing that just sort of happened over time. And Reed was another mentor of mine. And that just happened organically and naturally versus this sort of like, hey, will you be my mentor? Right. But I think looking at it from the lens of like, gosh, I'm early in my career and I'm learning who does things great. Just go have lunch with them. They don't have to be your mentor for a year.
And if you develop a trusting relationship, what you really need, I think what you're right, Sachin, what people are really asking is like, is there somebody I could go to when I get stuck?
Yeah.
To help me go, well, let's think about how should you think about that rather than here's what you need to do. Here's what I did. And that's what made me so successful. Right.
Yeah. Right.
Just more about, because I've used it a lot when people are early in their careers. They're like, I'm an accounts payable clerk and I'd like to be CFO next year. Like, okay, well, the timing's probably a little off. But go invite the CFO for lunch and ask them what it took to get there. And you'll find out that they went to night school for 8 years instead of 4 because they were working full time, or they, just everybody's story is usually more complicated and usually harder than it seems like from the outside. And that's what a trusting relationship will give you.
Exactly. This was so good. Sachin, I'm so glad we got to meet. I hope that you'll be our friend and come back again. And I want a tour of this factory.
Me too. Yeah.
Truly such an honor to speak with you both. Love your podcast and love the way you're just, bringing this sort of positive work culture across America. So thank you so much for having me. Just a real privilege.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Truth Works. This episode was produced and edited by Megan Hayward. Thank you to Kathleen Speckert and the whole Edit Audio team.